Вітаю, колеги. Ми продовжуємо нашу роботу.
And colleagues, we continue our work. Our next briefing is dedicated to the topic, the anniversary of an action, the criticism of the authorities in Crimea, and we are going to have Bohdan Ovcharuk, Speaker of Amnesty International Ukraine, Krassimir Yankov, researcher of Amnesty International Ukraine. You have the floor, gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Thanks a lot that you joined us for our briefing today. Today is the anniversary of an action occupation of Crimea by Russian Federation. Our organization publishes this new research study about the human rights in Crimea. The document which we published today, entitled 1 Year After Violation of the Rights to this freedom of speech meetings in Crimea, was the result of the field mission in the Crimea in February this year, and the result of the research work on the continental part of Ukraine and in Russia. In this report, we documented the violations of human rights on the part de facto of the authorities of the Crimea regarding the pro-Ukrainian mass media, pro-Ukrainian activists, the public organizations, Crimean Tatars, and the people who criticized the local authorities. As a result of an action in the so-called accession of Crimea to Russia 1 year ago, the Russian legislation became actually in fact used in the Crimea, which actually limits the freedoms of meetings, associations, and like in Russia, this repressive instrument is used against those who are different-minded people. In this case, the de facto source of the Crimea, they attack those who take the pro-Ukrainian position. The local de facto authorities and the Russian mentors provide the residents of the peninsula the following choice: either you agree, or you leave the peninsula, or you just shut up. As a result, those who criticize the authorities, they leave for the continental part of Ukraine, and the mass media, pro-Ukrainian TV and mass media, are forced to close. And those who remain, they are, let's say, persecuted by local authorities, especially in a special difficult situation, and the Crimean Tatars found themselves in the most difficult situation. We are talking about 10% of the residents of Crimea. A lot of the documented violations by us, relate to the Crimean Tatars. Now I'll give to my colleague the floor, who is going to tell about the abduction of the people and the persecution. I'm going to tell you a bit more detailed information provided to you about the methods of intimidation which were used by the local authorities over the last year. Unfortunately, in the Crimea, everything was aimed at intimidating or suppressing the people, or make them leave the peninsula. And the list of the violations since till the October resulted that those who criticized the authorities, they left the region, and those who remained there were persecuted by the authorities who tried to hush up those people. According to our data, over the last year, at least 7 people were abducted, 6 Crimean Tatars and 1 pro-Ukrainian activist, and at least, unfortunately, one of those was already found dead, with the traces of tortures on his bodies. 19-year-old Japarov and the Devlet Islamov, 29th of September last year, were abducted near their home in the city of Belogorsk. After their father and uncle addressing the local authorities, they created a so-called contact group who had to assist in the investigation and in providing contact between the relatives of those abducted and the local authorities. And they told me that he met several times with the local authorities, in the Crimea, and during all those meetings, several times they emphasized and told him that that was a special matter of honor to the local authorities, and that they were trying to do everything possible. They will not give this case unsolved, but unfortunately, by the moment of our visit in mid-February, up till now, nothing substantial progress was achieved. There were now no more, let's say, nothing was found during the investigation of the case. And everything becomes covered and unclear. The local authorities in Crimea, they create the atmosphere of fear in the peninsula, and they use the repressive Russian laws aimed against the non-NGOs, etc. And the result of that, during last year, in the Crimea, they now have a lot less possibility to launch open demonstration and manifestations. For example, the Crimean Tatars have difficulties in their memory days, like the day of deportation on May 18th, or the memory day of the victims of Stalinism and fascism in the end of August. They refused to launch such an event because they allegedly there was a forecast of very hot weather in the end of August, and they were seemingly, the local authorities seemingly were concerned about the health of the local population. That's why they prohibited them to have this gathering. But those who didn't were not afraid of the persecutions, and one of the most resounding event. Some of the people tried to celebrate the anniversary birth of Taras Shevchenko in Simferopol. Next day, one of those was fired from his work, from school. And they told him that he does not meet the requirements of the professional requirements, and two others were sentenced to some public forced work. All this situation also resulted in the creation of atmosphere of intolerance to those events which can be regarded by local authorities like the illegal or sabotage ones or something like that. Just to give you an example of the meeting of the Crimean Tatars in October last year, the members of the committee in those days, they launched, or they carried, they gathered for the press conference to tell that the local authorities did not allow them to have a special meeting dedicated to this date. During this press conference, a group of the young people in a sports attire actually slammed into the room, and they used some coloring liquid, and they poured that liquid on those who gathered there. Several days later, when 3 members of this committee were leaving the Crimea to the continental part of Ukraine, one of those in Kadyr was stopped, and he was actually accused at this point, and he was ousted from the Crimea since he did not take the Russian citizenship as a foreign citizen. His date of staying in the Crimea as a foreign citizen, 90 days, have expired. And the rest they have not yet returned to the Crimea because they are afraid of the further persecution. Speaking about the Crimean Tatars, we have to mention the situation with the Mejlis, their high supreme body of power, which is under the supreme pressure now. The leaders of Mejlis were ousted from the peninsula, and those who remained there on a regular basis, they provide some kind of the so-called explanatory conversation. And during the informal conversations, they require from them some manifestation, some proof of the loyalty to the local authority. For example, the availability of the Russian flags during those meetings, or the presence of the officials from the local authorities. Special attention should be given to the deputy chairman of Mejlis, who was arrested on January 29th while we were there. This person is the next in authority after Rifat Chubarov among the Crimean Tatars. Rifat Chubarov cannot actually come back to the Crimea, and his deputy was actually the acting leader, and who was accused of some kind of disturbances of the public disorder in February last year. As you remember, during those days, Crimea was part of the territory of Ukraine yet. But anyway, he was accused of the deaths of two people who deceased in the process, or who died in the process of that meeting. Next day, in the early morning, they carried out the search in his house. They took some of the people from the street with them, and according to the testimony of his wife, they humiliated her, they tried to insult her, offend her ethnic status as Crimean Tatar, and also they humiliated her, they tried to hurt her feelings as a Muslim. And the next, for some days, for 5 days, the lawyers of this person could not find him. He just disappeared. Also, we are witness of several violations when the lawyer and his relatives were warned, seemingly at 2 p.m., and they actually made an appointment for the meeting at 6 p.m. of the same day, just to make it impossible to prepare for the lawyers for this kind of sitting or meeting. Nobody were allowed to enter the courtroom. They tried to explain that there is no more room inside the courtroom. And then they changed their arguments, and they said that the building of the court was closed and nobody could enter that. And to our question why they decided to have this court sitting at 6 p.m. They said this is their work, as they could not allow us to enter, despite the fact that that court meeting was an open one. Actually, they extended the apprehension or arrest of that person till the mid-May. Unfortunately, we cannot see a big desire to do something about the restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine. We suppose that the society have to exert more pressure on Russia, at least to call upon them to respect the rights and the human rights of all the citizens or residents of Crimea, that everybody could equally have the right to the freedom of speech, association, meetings. And the biggest problem of the pressure exerted on the mass media will be told by my colleague. Speaking before the so-called referendum which took place in Crimea, the attack on the mass media in Russia proper was strengthened, and the Russian authorities were against any alternative interpretation of the events taking place in Crimea. Independent mass media in Russia were officially warned, and the authorities made it a lot of difficulties, financial difficulties for them. And they adopted the laws to, let's say, to control the activities of the mass media in Russia. The editors-in-chiefs were fired, and they were some of those were physically threatened. Some of the cases were opened against some of the mass media people. They tried to create the atmosphere of fear, intimidation, and some limiting laws to provide limitations for activities of the mass media and the NGOs, or public organizations. And they expressly explained to them that the pro-Ukraine position will be fraught with some very severe consequences for them. Also, they undertook some actions, interrogating people, carrying out the searches in the houses and the offices of Crimean Tatars and the residents of the Crimea. The Russian legislation aimed at the called combating extremism for a long time already had been used by Russia against the people, different-minded people. As a result, 1 year later, in the Crimean mass media, they have less and less place or room for pluralism, and to express the pro-Ukrainian views, it's absolutely impossible to do that. On 26th of January 2015, about 30 armed people, also 10 representatives of the security service, carried out the search in the Tatar TV channel ATR. They actually confiscated computers and all documents. Mostly they seized the documents during the confrontation February 26 last year when the Guru was actually arrested. The people called this kind of search the act of intimidation. Before that raid, the channel had to use the self-censorship and not to use such words as annexation or occupation. This happened after the journalists were warned several times when the authorities called the activities of the channel an extremist one, and they threatened the journalists with the criminal persecution. Some of the journalists had to leave the Crimea, fearing the persecution. Among those, it was the blogger Bagutskaya, who was summoned for interrogation after they searched her house and actually carried out the interrogation.
After Crimean annexation, all the mass media After annexation, the Crimean authority ordered to all of the mass media to be re-registered according to Russian legislation. For instance, QHA, Russian Information Agency, they were not allowed to do that, and they even did not have any reasons why they didn't get the application for re-registration. At least 5 bigger stations were deprived of broadcasting capacity in the bigger cities in Crimea, arguing that there was a tender and they didn't have just time to do that. And Amnesty International considers that independent mass media should not be threatened with closing down because of not have enough time for re-registration. So mass media in Crimea should be allowed, specifically for Crimean Tataran mass media, to have enough time to be re-registered. Crimean authorities should give enough time to the mass media to be re-registered as well. Must be a proper investigation of legal nature or illegal nature of the search and the ATM. Before Q&A, I would like to say that we have a video with the people we were speaking to in Crimea, and all of the people that would like to understand what happened. It was an interview with Manchaga's wives, with 2 people that were kidnapped in Crimea and the representatives of entire channel. Thank you, colleagues. Do you have any other questions? My first question is, we faced in our work with the problem when Western journalists ask for contacts in Crimea for people that could illustrate the situation. The majority of people that already moved to Kiev. So we have an impression that there is a total atmosphere of fear in Crimea. My question is how you get sources of information in this atmosphere, in that environment, and do you have any proofs? What are the basis for your conclusions? What is the technology of information collection? From our presentation, the majority of cases concerning Crimean Tatars, the reasons are all the criticism, all the people that are criticizing Crimean authorities. They were pushed out of Crimea in the very beginning of the occupation of the peninsula. So we do not have them there. And with the Crimean Tatars, the situation is rather different because they don't have any other place to live. They consider Crimea as their homeland, and in the development of this report, we had a couple of interviews in Kiev with the pro-Crimean activists. We had a chain of interviews with Crimean Tatars in Moscow, because Crimean Tatars, since Soviet time, have certain standing in Russia, so to say. We met relatives of the people that suffered in Crimea. We had a meeting with representative of present prosecutor's office and present or acting ombudsman in Crimea, and they explained their point of view or their standpoint. So if speaking of the influence on ordinary people, the wave of kidnappings, searches last summer and autumn, the ordinary people, Crimean Tatars, they were feared. They were not only anxious that they don't have any right to use the banner, Crimean Tatar banner, they didn't have any courage to even say that they are Tatars in Crimea. They were feared of letting their children cover a distance to the nearest school, etc. And now, after Chegoza arrest, we still have this situation. We have some cases in March, and that's why the bullying of Crimean Tatars is continuing. And I believe that the anxiety in the local population is rather growing. Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. In continuation of this topic, do you have any pressure from Crimean authority, or probably have certain facts of any threatening or something like that? Our delegation, we had one Russian citizen, I am Bulgarian in my nationality, and Bohdan, who is Ukrainian. And as you understand, only me and our Russian representative, we visited Crimean prosecutor's office, because for Bohdan there could be certain problems of leaving the peninsula in that case, if he would have appeared in the prosecutor's office. The attitude toward us was more or less normal, but according to our personal understanding, probably was not understand. They didn't understand what we did say to them. So the atmosphere of fear in Crimea, present in Crimea, not only is exists for the local citizens, but as well for any visitors to Crimea, because you have a lot of people that were military fatigue, and when you come back to Ukraine again, I was escorted by 2 armored vehicles as well. So of course people, they know that human rights watchers, they have their work there, and everybody understands. So you did not have any, you didn't feel any pressure from, it was a eavesdropping of our cell phones, but if to be say open, to be candid, even in Ukraine we have eavesdropping of our cell phones. We didn't have any specific, any concrete meeting with the local authorities that tried to forbid us to meet anybody. And the conclusions of Amnesty International, of course, will be of a certain weight, will be watched by Western governments and international organizations, but most probably there's no illusions that Russian authorities or Crimean authorities would change their line of conduct based on your conclusions. We are an independent organization. Amnesty International is not funded by any of the governments. One of the countries of the highest criticism is the USA in the issue of detention conditions for the prisoners, which is positively accepted by Russian mass media. So most hopefully the things we've published, it will reach the target and certain measures will be taken. Colleagues, do you have, and once again, a bit of comment. Last year, we published a lot of conclusions, documents, etc. on the freedom of speech in Russia. And of course, Amnesty International, it's our primary priority to understand this problem, because in Russia the freedom of speech has been suppressed tremendously, and when we met the human rights watchers in Crimea, they understand that Crimea is probably the most constricted part of Russian Federation, and Crimea is in the worst position in this case. Thank you for your conclusion. Not very nice conclusions, but nevertheless we are expecting you'll share with us